Is masturbation addiction real? I know that when you look this question up online, you're going to find conflicting evidence. Some evidence is going to support that masturbation indeed is healthy for you. Other evidence is going to say it's problematic. I'm Dr. Trish Leigh, brain health and sex addiction recovery coach. I want to break this down with you so that you know how to discern for you if masturbation is healthy or if it's a problem. So let's talk about masturbation addiction. Is it real, first and foremost? The answer is yes. Now, many professionals don't know this, and what they're reporting, it's not out of malice. When they report that masturbation is healthy for you, it's because they're coming from the standpoint that masturbation addiction isn't a thing. But that's not because it's not, it's because those professionals don't know about it. So, recently, in recent years, a few years ago, the World Health Organization, in the International Classification of Diseases, the 11th edition, this is the world's book of what qualifies as a problem in physical and mental health, the International Classification of Diseases. In this most recent edition was added compulsive sexual behavior disorder, which many people call CSBD. I call it hypersexuality. It's a lot easier to keep up with. So, hypersexuality has been named as a problematic behavior, a compulsive behavior. So, when it comes to masturbation addiction, the question is, do you have a compulsion? Are you compelled? Do you have recurring cravings and sexual urges to masturbate? That's the question. So, we know from a recent Kinsey Institute study that more than a quarter of people masturbate less than a few times a month. So, the majority of people are masturbating a few times a month, up to one time a week. Then there's 20% of people who masturbate 2 to 3 times a week. There's less than 20% of people who masturbate 4 or more times a week. So these can be kind of bars that we set for you in terms of how often are you masturbating. If it's 2 to 3 times a week, and especially 4 or more times a week, this is likely something that falls into the category of compulsion. Now, I want to break down compulsion for you a little bit further. A compulsion is that you have a craving, something happens that gives you the urge to act out in a certain way. The urge kind of enters your mind and you may feel it in your body, but it is pulling you towards that behavior. So, this compulsion is different than just a thought or a feeling that you might do something that you can then wave off. It is growing in intensity and basically you can't ignore it. So the idea is any behavior or anything that you consume, a substance, because there's behavioral addictions and there's substance abuse or addictions. It falls on a continuum from use to addiction. So, first, you may have used masturbation as a way to self soothe, feel good, relax. Use is still within your control. It's still something that you're deciding to do. It's not a compulsion, not a thing that you feel the need to do. So, there's use. Then, after frequent use, you may enter into the realm of misuse. Now you're using it a little bit more. Perhaps you're using it to soothe difficult emotions or feelings or stress. So now you're using it as stress management or mood regulation. Use becomes misuse. Then at a certain point, misuse becomes abuse. Now you're doing it even more frequently. Perhaps your few times a month or one time a week now becomes 2 times a week. Your 2 times a week becomes 3 times a week. Your 3 times a week becomes 4 or more times a week. Use, misuse, abuse. Now, at the level of abuse, this is where desire or want shifts into need or compulsion. So, when we move to the next level from abuse, now we're entering into the realm of compulsion. This is when your brain needs to masturbate to not feel bad instead of doing it to feel good. And I'm going to give you 5 indicators of masturbation addiction in just a minute and then a cherry on the top. So stay with me. But if you move over from abuse to compulsion, now you have a need. That's when urges and cravings, and you might think about it during work. You may want to act out at inappropriate times and inappropriate places because you feel the need. That compulsion then grows into addiction. We know when compulsion becomes addiction, the brain mechanisms that are at play in terms of the reward center and the reward pathways have changed. Many times they have changed back in the use, misuse, and abuse categories, but they show up when you get to the compulsion and the addiction categories. Now you can't stop. So it's something you need to do so you don't feel bad, and it's out of your control to a certain extent. So if you fall into the category of you're masturbating frequently and you feel the need to do it, listen up for the 5 qualifications of what qualify as a masturbation addiction. Number 1 is that there are frequent and can be intense sexual urges that are calling you to masturbate. You feel cravings and urges, you feel a need. Number 2 is that this has happened for more than 6 months. And remember, if you're still at this has been happening to you for a month or two, it's not that it's going to stop if you continue to masturbate. It's going to continue to grow. Use becomes misuse, becomes abuse, becomes compulsion, becomes addiction. You're on your way towards compulsion and addiction with frequent and consistent and especially intense masturbation. Okay, so 6 months and 6 months or more where you feel compelled or have the compulsion, and at the same time, it's interrupting your personal and your professional life. So if it is showing up for you and it's interrupting your day to day, then perhaps your masturbation habit is indeed a masturbation addiction. Okay, so that's number 2. Number 3 is that it is impacting your relationship and your ability to get an erection and have an orgasm with a partner. So, you know how I just said that it's showing up in your personal and professional life? You may be acting out at times that you shouldn't, and now you can't be with your partner due to desensitization in the reward center and the reward pathways in your brain. So, this causes a dopamine dependency that pulls you back to masturbation. And when it's pulling you back, unfortunately, it's pushing you away from your relationship due to sexual arousal dysfunction, what I call SAD. Okay, so number 4 is that now you may have, number 4, you may have feelings of guilt and shame. And so I think this is interesting. Many people think this is a bad thing, but you know how you may have had a behavior before and it never bothered you. It never bothered you at all. Like no big deal. You're masturbating 2 or 3 times a week and it felt good. But now all of a sudden, it seems off to you. You feel bad about doing it when you get done. This is when your nervous system recognizes that you have the need to do this behavior and that it is out of your control and it is impacting your life. But at the same time, you can't stop. This can be a scary place for people. It can increase denial where you start looking up, is masturbation good for you? Because you want to hear, yes, it is. You want to read, masturbation is serving you, because in your heart, in your mind, in your brain, you know that it's a problem. You know you've crossed the threshold of use to misuse to abuse to compulsion, and that you may be shackled to this behavior. You may also have it show up as physical injuries. You may that's from intense stimulation at the physical level. You may also feel it in your brain as brain fog. You may feel increased anxiety and depression. Frequent masturbation leads to something that I call drained brain. So drained brain makes it so that your brain feels worn out after all of that flood of dopamine. Okay, so Number three is masturbation to stressful situations. So if you find that you're masturbating in response to stressors, that means that masturbation has now become a mood regulation behavior for you. So many times when I talk about this, I discuss it as that compulsive masturbation actually isn't about sexuality. In the end, it's about dopamine and about mood regulation. So, dopamine is the molecule of motivation, more, and pleasure. It's going to motivate you back for more of what made you feel good. So, you're doing that to offload the stress that is building in your brain. We know that when you get caught in this loop of escapism and external regulation, you're going to something outside of yourself to make yourself feel good. What happens is you can lose the ability to make yourself feel good from the inside. So ultimately, if you keep hitting that high dopamine button, that lever, what'll happen is you will lose the ability to do it internally. Many people then struggle with anhedonia. And then what that does is it means you can't feel. You don't feel that bad anymore, but you also don't feel that good anymore. And it continues to lead you back to seeking the behavior at higher levels so that you can get more dopamine rushing through your system. So let me summarize this and then we're going to put the cherry on the top. Number one is that you have a masturbation habit that has frequency to it, and that you are going to masturbation more than 2 to 3 and especially 4 times a week. You've been doing that for more than 4 months. You it is showing up in your life. It is impacting your personal and your professional life. You are masturbating to offset the stress of stressful situations or of daily stressors. At the same time, this compulsion is making you feel guilty and have some shame about it now, where maybe you didn't in the past. And then here's the cherry on the top: you can't stop. So, if you are wondering if you have a masturbation addiction, I challenge you this: try to stop. And when you try to stop, you will find that you likely have an increase in anxiety. You will have even more intense, frequent urges to return to masturbation to take away those feelings of anxiety. And you will find that you will have withdrawal symptoms. Your brain may feel very brain fog. You may feel intense anhedonia. You may feel lack of motivation. It's likely going to be difficult. So take that challenge. You don't have to believe me. You can try that challenge. Many people say to me, Dr. Trish, I believe you. And what I say to them is, you don't have to believe me. This isn't my opinion. You have to understand this. It's neuroscience. So, the core mechanism is a dysregulated brain pattern. You are draining your brain by frequent, consistent, and especially intense masturbation. When you do that, it creates autonomic nervous system dysfunction in the brain pattern that your brain is using of electrical energy. At the core is a dysfunctional brain, which leads you back to the behavior that caused it to help it feel better. It is your quintessential negative feedback loop. So, what's the solution? Where the problem lies, so does the solution. Regulating your brain. You have to get your brain back to the optimal brain performance pattern. It is the way through. So if you want more information, please go over to my website, drtrishleigh.com. I have programs that are designed for porn-free brain forever. We know there's a connection between porn use and compulsive masturbation. Science shows that. That program is also designed to address any unwanted sexual behaviors. There's lots of people in that program for masturbation addiction. I encourage you to get into that program so that you can get the proper resources to move through this thing and become free from a habit that has become an addiction that won't go away until you address it. So please go over to drtrishleigh.com, get into the program so you can move through the rest of your life free from the shackles of masturbation. All right, I hope this video helps you. And until next time, control your brain or it'll control you.